Hello and welcome back to one more installment just for this weekend. We're going to be back. We got stuff coming up. But for one more installment of the Campfire Stories for this Sunday, still me, Joe, and now you can see we have another guest. You know him from Chew. You know him from Farmhand. May not know him, but you should know him from a book that he and I collaborated on together called Bear versus Bear, out from Record Publishing. Rob Guillory, dude, buddy, good to have you here, man. How you doing? What's going on?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I have a little bit of a cold. I'm wrestling with, but I'm doing all right. So can't complain.
Right on. Um, well, look, we're doing the Storytellers Convention, and kind of posited it off a little differently to everybody, but the core thing that I'm just interested in getting into with everybody, especially with guys like you and Brandon, and actually Allred, who I've worked with either now or in the past, like once you get into the work, there's always the work to focus on. You
Hmm.
don't really get into like, why are we doing this work, and
Yeah.
like, I think this convention is sort of getting around to the general question of like why storytelling, but
Mm.
then with each individual, like with you, why comics and why
Mm.
comics is specific and what gets it back. So the question I sort of always open up with, because it's something I'm always fascinated by, like what is your earliest memory of comics? Like what's your first contact
Mm.
with this thing that's now become your pursuit?
Mm. Mm. I think I shared this yesterday, but I think the first memory I have of comics at all were, like I said, I had two uncles who I always call prototypical comic geeks. Way before any Comic Cons were what they are now. Um, this is in the 80s. They were very into all of it: Thundercats, He-Man, toys, comics, and they kind of inherited a fairly sizable comic collection from my grandfather's younger brother, who's a Vietnam vet, and they had a giant suitcase full of comics, just classic 60s, 70s, 80s comics. And I would just go over when I was, two, before I even knew how to read. And for whatever reason, they were fine with me just digging through their stuff. And I don't think it did they. I don't remember any of it ever being bagged or board or any of that stuff. It was just in a suitcase, and they were cool with a 2 year old just rifling through their stuff, which is crazy. But I would just go through it and just was blown away by all of it. It just bit me pretty hard. So yeah, that's absolutely the first memory I have of it.
So 60s, 70s, 80s comics. So a lot of Marvel, DC. Like what do you remember sticking out in your child brain? What downloaded to
Mm.
your hardline code from that time?
There was several particular covers that like jumped out at me. One of them was, I forget what issue of, I think it was, I don't remember if it's Hulk or Fantastic Four, but there's a cover. It's a black cover with Hulk and the Thing from the Fantastic Four fighting
Mhm.
on the cover. It's
Oh,
an
sure.
early issue of one of those series. But I was just fascinated by it because I knew both characters. I'm like, oh my god, this is like amazing. So like old Fantastic Four. I mean, he had old X-Men. I remember he had the Phoenix Saga in its
Oh,
completion. He had
wow.
all of it. He had all that stuff. It was probably my first exposure to just straight up serious dramatic storytelling in comics, like
Mhm.
very dramatic with Jean Grey dying and all that stuff. The first time she died. Um,
Right.
so yeah, that Green Lantern Corps, Teen Titans when it was I think
Wolfman
uh,
Perez.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Is Perez. Another one that was very deep into drama. So
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of that stuff, man. That was all of my first comics, and it all stuck in my mind. Oh, also a bunch of Thor. I mean, all of the I remember, what was the Fire Herald of Galactus?
Oh,
He
Nova.
was, no, he wasn't Nova. I'm blanking
Oh,
on the
the
guy's
dude
name.
who had the
Yes,
pole.
yes,
Oh, yeah, I know
yes.
exactly. I can picture him. I can also picture him because he was also on like that ad for the Silver Surfer video game that was in the
Oh
back of a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
80s, 90s
Was it
comics. Yeah.
was it Fire Lord maybe?
That's sounding good. If anyone in the chat
Okay,
knows, you
okay.
win a no prize.
Yeah, there's
Right
there's
on.
certain covers are just burned into my brain,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's one of them. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny how like certain things will just stick on you. There's this issue of What If that I still have. I still have my exact copy by Rob Liefeld and Jim Valentino of like what if Wolverine became the Agent of Shield. And I
Oh
read
wow.
it. I read it a number of times, but it was such a strange cover in that I don't know whose decision this was, but the
Mhm.
whoever colored the cover Wolverine's eyes on the cover,
Mhm.
there's no pupils. It's
Mm.
it's all red. It's completely red. And I
Mm.
was just like, I would just stare at this cover and just have it imprinted in my brain and think about it when I was like at Catholic school. It was like trying to solve the mystery of whatever this thing was that I found at 7-Eleven, just like,
Yeah.
whoa, what
Yeah.
is going on here? So no, that rules. Okay, so you have the suitcase and it's full of this,
Mhm.
which I, by the way, having a big just pile of comics dumped on you like that, I really feel is
Mhm.
like the ideal way to get in. Allred mentioned yesterday, he was talking about how he woke up, his brother had knocked him off a table or something, and he woke up in the
Mhm.
hospital, and his brother convinced his parents to buy him all those comics, and just they were just like everywhere, and that's how I got. That was like his earliest
That's good.
memory. Yeah, it was a good
Very
scam
nice.
because his brother Lee was really into comics. But anyway, it was just
Right.
all there. And then for me growing
Yeah.
up, my initial comic book store was 7-Eleven, but I was really
Mhm.
blessed to be in Los Angeles and they had amazing stores to still do. Like
Mhm.
Golden Apple's still there. But they had this
Mhm.
store called Heidi Ho Comics, and another one called
Mhm.
Superior Comics. And I talked about Superior Comics yesterday. So I'll mention with Heidi Ho, the great thing about them is it was a big store and they had everything and it was disorganized. At least it felt
Oh wow.
disorganized. And the
Mhm.
cool thing about it was this is 1986, 19 through 1992. And so you
Wow.
had like the Mobius epics were coming out, and those were right next to the
Mhm.
Rob Liefeld comics, and those were right next to the
Wow.
Robert Crumb comics, and those were so it was just like the proto manga, like the Shiro Appleseed stuff, all that kind of
Wow.
Akira, and
Mhm.
just having it all in one place was just like this is the coolest thing ever, and it was just
Yeah.
again printed and fiery in your brain. So okay, so you have the
Yeah.
suitcase full of comics. So
Mhm.
what are your next steps in terms of like how do you make that hobby yours, right? Like
Yeah.
this is your, I think it was your uncle's.
Mhm.
How does it become Rob's thing?
Um, I think the gateway to it came at some point. I realized I wanted more things than my parents were going to buy me. Uh, so I was like, hey, I want this thing. I don't remember if it was, whether it was comics or toys or games or whatever. And I remember my mom telling me at a very young age, I think probably 7 or 8, saying like, hey, you need a job, kid. Like you need a job because you need
At
money
seven
for all
or
the
eight,
things. Yeah,
right
yeah.
on.
And I'm like, well, how do I get a job? I'm like 7 or 8. Like, what do I do? And my grandmother owned like a janitorial service. She would clean like doctors' offices, whatever. And my grandmother, who is like ever the opportunist, she's like, "You want to work? I'll put you to work," And so we made a deal at age 7 or 8. I would go with her on. She cleaned the offices on every Saturday morning. So right like during Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh,
So I totally
brutal.
would miss. I sacrificed Saturday morning cartoons. I was up at 5:30 every morning on a Saturday, and I would just go with her in the dark to a dentist's office and clean a dentist's office till like 11. So I would miss the block of cartoons,
Uh,
and she would pay me a flat fee every month. And every Friday, whenever they picked me up they would pick me up every Friday. I'd sleep over and then do the office the next morning on Saturday. But the Friday afternoon after I got off of school, my grandfather would pick me up and bring me to Big Comics. It was our local shop, which was just a little. It was in a shopping mall. It was just one little glass aside. Like it wasn't even like an entire like it was like an office essentially. And you just walk in, but it was a most fantastic place ever. And it's just long boxes, shelves and shelves of comics. They used to have the binders with the like Marvel trading cards in them,
oh
and
yeah,
you can buy them individually instead of he's like, well, I need the Wolverine. Like, of course, I think Wolverine was the most expensive one. He's like
yep.
$4 or something.
Mhm.
Which so like one by one, I think the first thing so every Friday I'd go and buy comics, but I'd also started collecting these cards, and I still have it. And I got the complete set. I tried giving it to my kids, and my son's like, this is fine.
Oh,
He
come
was
on, kid.
very he was completely unimpressed.
These are
Like,
like
how
1990
long?
Marvel cards.
Yes, this is like
So
I
it's like
think the
Art Adams and stuff.
first.
Yeah, come on.
Yes, it's fantastic, which I'm okay with. I'm like, I'll keep it. I'll keep it. I love it still. But that was the first time I started collecting for myself. So this is This is 90, 89 or
Mhm.
90. So we're talking some pretty good stuff. And I think I was in third or fourth grade. And for the first time, I came across some buddies of mine that loved comics like I did. And I remember specifically we were indoors for like a rain drill. It was raining or something. We couldn't go outside for recess. We're sitting in the halls. One of them opens up his bag. He's like, "I gotta show you something. Like, what is this? What's this gonna be?" You know? He takes it out, and it's a cover of a comic book. I think it's New Mutants, and it's got this guy on the cover called Cable, drawn by Rob Liefeld. And I was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Dude, this is awesome." And we just from there, I remember all these like Liefeld was awesome. Like it's like
Oh, yeah.
Liefeld Cable. I think there was an issue where on the cover Wolverine is fighting Cable. I'm like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." And
Yep.
then Mark Silvestri was on X-Men. Bishop gets created. Like all this stuff just starts popping. And I think I don't remember exactly when, but I remember the X-Men cartoon being fairly close to that. I don't
Yeah, it
remember
was around
what.
there. Yeah.
So all this stuff just started showing up at the same time, and then one week I go to the comic shop, and buddy, the owner of the shop was like, "Hey man, you should check out this new company called Image Comics." I'm like, "What is Image Comics?" He's like, "Oh yeah, well check out this comic shop newsletter, and on the cover is like this book called Spawn." I'm like, "What is this?" And I'm like flipping through. It had like 5-page preview in it. I'm like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this ever. So I picked up Spawn. It totally freaked me out. So what is going on here? He's a demon. What is this? Um, so Spawn, and then several other books. I loved Liefeld's work.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't get into Youngblood. I got into Brigade. Brigade was my book.
Oh, nice. Right on.
Yeah. So I that was that, and I think right around that time that the Superman was going on, I believe.
Mhm.
So Nightfall was going on around that same time. My local shop had like they had a deal. They're like, well, you pay $20 a month, you'll get all of the Death of Superman issues, all the Reign of the Superman stuff, the newsstand editions, and the collector's editions. So like I'm like, sweet, that's a hell of a deal. So I just would sign up for it, go pick it up every Friday, and buy. I'd bag and board them and expect to make $1 million down the road. I was investing in my future. Um, you know, I still have, I think, pretty much all that stuff at my mom's house. It's still, I think,
Oh,
it's
right on.
still all bagged and board. It's still there, man. But that was the first time I really. That was when I started building my own thing. And it was during that time also with that group of friends who, again, this is the first time I'm around a bunch of kids that also love comics. I remember, I don't know what sparked it. We were all sort of artists as well. So I was just doodling here and there at that point. But one day, for whatever reason, I decided, oh, this could be really cool. I'll just go. I went home and I had this crazy idea to make a comic. And I just made a comic that afternoon after school. Pink construction paper, folded in half, stapled, some
Yeah.
ballpoint pen, and it was just this goofy comic that was just super violent about some guy in the desert who fights a giant monster or whatever. I don't know. I still have all that stuff, but it
Right
it
on.
sparked. It just lit a flame, and then from there, from fourth grade on, I was just making mini comics like crazy. Just I just loved. I started playing around with other characters. I would take like Spider Man. Oh, I'll make Spider Man fight Doctor Octopus. Like the
Yeah.
entire slot of every issue was basically just I like drawing. I like this character. I like this character. Let's have them fight. That was it. The entire
Yeah.
entirety of my writing at that point. So that was a beginning for me.
Yeah, there's something, I'm with you. So we're pretty much the same age. We're in simpatico with like what kind of stuff we were reading at the time. And
Mm,
it's funny, like I thought, and I still think that those Rob Liefeld New Mutants and X-Force and that whole run and leading up into the Image stuff, and
mm,
credits to McFarlane, Liefeld, or McFarlane,
mm.
Larson, all those guys, but focus on Liefeld. It just spoke to something that you
Yeah,
wanted as a kid so bad. It was like this primal, I mean, I don't know if cerebral is the right term, but like I remember looking at his comics and just thinking like, Like this is what comics should be, you know? And yeah, their plots were really simple. It was like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
well, there's Cable and there's a Mutant
Mhm.
Liberation Front and they're bad guys, so we're gonna go fight those guys. And then you would
Yeah.
go, well, I'm a kid and I can understand this, so I'm gonna go. I had the same exact experience you did, dude. It was a rainy day in LA, which is a pretty rare
Mhm.
thing. So PE was canceled, so we're in Mr. R's room, and
Mhm.
I was just like, well, I had this loose paper, I had nothing to do. And so
Mhm.
I wrote a comic where my characters fought the Violator from
Oh
Spawn.
well.
So I was just
Mhm.
like, whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't know about intellectual property rights. I have no idea.
Right.
Super cool, you know?
Right. Right.
And Spawn already, I've told the story a couple times, but was going to Catholic school and looking at Spawn comics. It was just like,
Uh,
I'm going to get in trouble, but it was like, couldn't stop, you know?
mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyway, all right. So, okay. So
Yeah.
you but it sounds like about fifth, third or fourth grade. You're starting to draw fifth grade. You're
Yeah.
starting to draw comics.
Mhm.
You're starting to draw these comics. Now you say mini comics. Do you mean you're just doing this for yourself? Or are you publishing these, or what do you
Oh
do? You
no, no,
Xerox
no,
or what?
no. I mean, no, I didn't. No, I had no technology at that point. And so I mean, it was just, it was literally just, loose leaf paper, construction paper, folded in half, a couple staples on the end, and that's good to go. I still
Yeah.
actually. What's funny is, I think what's the most interesting about that time is, I never really showed. Most of the stuff I did, I never showed anyone. To be honest with you, like
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
did it for
Yeah.
myself.
Yep.
I think I brought a couple to school, but that was about it. From there, I just did it for myself, and I had entire uh, like summers at home where I would just pump this stuff out and never show anybody.
Yep.
And I still have all that stuff, but I think what's interesting is I had I started kind of setting deadlines for myself. Like I think it was my first time really setting goals for myself. And like I would go to my grandparents' house on the weekends sometimes. Well, whenever I wasn't when I worked with her, but also during the summers, I would go over there and hang out with her and just be farting around. And I would be like, man, I should be drawing right now. Like like this feeling of like the deadline is like hovering over me. But I'm like a child. Like there is no deadline. Um, so I think it was the I think I was already groomed to do what I do now back then, like because
Yeah.
that's how it is now. Like I do have a deadline that I have set for myself that I have to meet. So I that's always been there in my life for whatever reason. I don't know what I would do if that wasn't there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because knowing you now and having worked with you now, like I was at Image when, she was coming out, at least initially, and you
Mhm.
were always your rep was like you're super reliable and super like on time, and Rob would be
Cool.
hitting deadlines. And it's funny because Hillary Jenkins of Assertion pointed this out in the chat too, which is like, you're waking up at 5 a.m. That's really
Mm.
weird for a kid, but you have this desire to connect with
Mhm.
comics, and the only way to connect with comics is if you had money. The only way to get money is waking up at 5 a.m. and doing that. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to see that how that then develops because then you
Mhm.
have this reward system of again the desire and then the hard work ethic built in, and then I
Mhm.
build it and just show up every Saturday, blah 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 blah. And now I get my
Yeah.
money, and now I'm reading Return of
Yeah.
Superman,
Yeah.
and then to see
Mhm.
that extend out to you as a kid, that like it's cool to hear this, but it's also kind of like not like it's not surprising to me that Rob Guillory was handing himself intense deadlines and meeting them as a young person.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's funny. Like I have memories. Uh, so part of the job working with my grandmother, I honestly think that experience of getting with her and being handed responsibility at such a young age, and not just responsibility, but sort of control over my destiny to
Yeah,
some degree. It's like, well, if you want to change your environment, then here it is. Here's your opportunity.
right.
And she would even tell me like during summers, I'd be like, I think I want to make a little extra money because eventually I was buying video games. Eventually, it was like, I remember there was an X-Men video game for Sega Genesis,
Sega
and
Genesis.
this,
Oh, dude. Yep.
yeah, yep, yep. Again, I mean, we had such like so few kind of comic-y things back then that anytime
Mm.
something popped up, I'm like, I got to get that. So the X-Men game was a thing. I knew it was going to be like 45 bucks or something like that. So I'm like, I'm like, I remember having a little like kind of calendar thing and like charting. Like I knew how much I was making, and I knew when the release date was, and I was like setting goals of like if I save this much here, 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 and here, I'll have it for this when it comes out. Like I
Yeah.
was strategizing and budgeting at a super young age. Um, so I think all of that it all serves me now, you know. But I couldn't
Hmm.
have thought. I didn't know what I was. I can't say I didn't know what I was doing. I had moments where I was sort of. I distinctly remember washing windows one Saturday, and it was in like it was in front of the dentist office, which is like right off the main drag off the road. So cars are driving by, and I'm just cleaning these windows, and I had this moment of sort of like embarrassment of like, oh, they're gonna see me like working or whatever. I was a super insecure, like shy kid. Um, I'd never be the kind of guy to do this kind of thing back then. But I was doing it, and I had this other voice in my head say, "You're like essentially something along the lines of." You're doing like real stuff. Like, like you're doing like real stuff. You're doing like real life stuff at like a really young age. That's only gonna like you're like ahead, like somehow.
Yeah.
And I always had this sense of being sort of like ahead of the curve. And I always looked at I've always sort of been an old man, like even as a child.
Right.
Like I've always been 30 as like a child. So like when I hit
Right.
my 30s, like I'm 41 now. And I feel like, oh yeah, here I finally have arrived. Like my body finally caught up with what was going on inside the entire time. Um, so yeah, I think all of that created patterns that I still use now, whether it's waking up first thing in the morning, very early, and getting stuff done. I was doing that since I was a kid anyway. So this is not new to me, you know.
Yeah. So okay, so you're drawing these comics for yourself. You're obsessing over these deadlines that are self-imposed. At what point are you like, and maybe this is the point, but at what point are you like, you know what? This could be like a thing I do for a living. Like this isn't
Yeah.
something I have to do at home. Like I could put these out and people might actually read them. So where does that come in?
College, not until college. I didn't.
Okay.
Again, this is the internet didn't really come into my life until I was a sophomore in high school. So I had no frame of reference. Again, I didn't know. I just didn't think of comics as a real job. I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
that you had to live in New York City or something at commuting to Marvel or DC or whatever to make that happen. I just thought I'm living in South Louisiana. I've never been. I mean, the furthest I've ever been from home was Texas or Mississippi.
Sure.
I'd never been on a plane, any of that stuff. I'd never known anyone who was an artist as professionally. So, my dad, I have a very vivid memory of being very young and driving with my dad. My dad asked me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I thought artist, but I was like, that's not real. So my response was something along the lines of, I don't know, maybe like an architect, because I knew like that was like a real job. Um, so,
Right.
but I was like, I have no intention of being an architect. I just told him what he wanted to hear. So it wasn't until college, my first semester, I got a job on the university newspaper as a staff cartoonist because I was an editor in chief of my school newspaper in high school. So I started already kind of dabbling in publication back then. So it just made sense as soon as I saw that they had a university newspaper. I picked it up and was like, I wonder if they have a comics section because I was a big fan of comic sections and Sunday comics. So I flipped to the back. It's like some garbage comic, and they had an ad next to it that said, "Now hiring, staff cartoonists, whatever." Like perfect. So I got the gig. It was I think $35 a week for a comic strip, and I actually ended up doing two comic strips a week. One of them was just whatever I wanted in the back, and the other one was a a political comic strip,
Uh,
which was the politics of a college student.
oh
Like
yeah.
it was atrocious. It was so
I'm
bad.
19. I'll tell you how it is. That
Right,
worked out great.
exactly. That was me. That was me. That was me all day. So I got the gig, and around that time, I kind of started dabbling more online and more. I started searching for how do you break into comics, and I started finding more and more stuff. And uh, eventually, there was a comic show in Houston that a buddy of mine told me about, and around that time, I had discovered the work of Jim Food
Oh yeah.
and like the indie comic guys I've just found. because I was a big Kevin Smith fan at that point because I'm in college.
Yeah.
So he's got a comic drawn by Jim Food, all these kind of indie guys. I found Dave Crosland. I started expanding in the
Right
message boards and
on.
stuff.
Hmm.
So like, is around that time I realized that there's a different way to do comics. It's not all Marvel and DC, so, which was good because I happen to be absolute trash at drawing Marvel and DC style. It was not for me, and I tried forever. I thought I got to draw like John Romita Jr. to like break into comics or whatever. So that wasn't happening. I found the indie guys. I started kind of um, I basically unlearned everything I had learned art style wise, like from watching the Marvel guys, and I started really leaning into my animation background because I was also a huge animation fan. I was a Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Animaniacs, all that stuff. That was me more than anything else. So I started leading into that and was really good at cartooning. Way better at cartooning than I was at the kind of house style at Marvel. So around that time, that's when I got the gig at the university for the newspaper. I'm recreating my entire art style from scratch. And around that time, a buddy of mine hits me up from Houston. He's like, "Hey man, we're about to have a Comic Con over here. Maybe you should come hang out, come check it out." I'd never been to a Comic Con before, but I was thinking about comics as a real thing. So I look at the guest list. The guest list was Frank Cho, Mark Waid, Mike Waringo,
Oh wow.
um, Scott Kurtz, Jim Mafood, uh, Andy Kuhn,
Oh wow.
and Scott Morse were all there. Just in like some rinky dink, like little tiny. It was like in a hotel room or something. It was like
Oh
barely
wow.
anyone there. And I'm like, I went there just for my food because I was a huge fan of his. I'm like, dude, I got all these books like of his stuff. I want to I'm gonna get him signed. I want a portfolio review, whatever. So we head out to Houston, and for whatever reason, we decided to take a Greyhound bus.
Oh
Um,
man.
I have no idea why we did that. I have no idea. So we did Greyhound bus, hung out in Houston for a weekend, and met Mafood, met Andy Kuhn, a bunch of guys, got portfolio reviews and everything. Which those are my very first reviews, and super helpful. Mafood in particular was very he basically was the first guy to like just breathe life into me and
Mhm.
say, dude, you already got this. Like you have this. Like you're already doing it. Because at that point I was also learning Photoshop as well. So I was coloring my own work in Photoshop on top of
Oh wow.
penciling and inking, making like sequential comics. So Jim was like, you've got this, you can do this. So that was the beginning of me really like chasing it as a career path back in like 2001, 2002.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So, okay, 2001, 2002. So it was like because a lot of those guys sound like Jim Valentino image guys. You have like Frank Cho. I think
Mm.
may have just started Liberty Meadows. I know
Mm.
Girl Scouts was there.
Yep.
Okay, so I first got to know you before Chew, which at least knew your
Mm.
work because we published an
Mm.
anthology called Pop Gun.
Yep.
That was the first time I remember. I think that was your first. Yeah, I think you actually mentioned it earlier. It's your first thing that was actually at Image. Period. Right?
Yes, yes. I had submitted several things to get published at Image, and Valentino actually was the guy who rejected them all,
Oh, right
which
on.
was fine because thank God he
Yeah,
did reject them because
he's
they
a
were awful.
smart. Jim Valentino's a smart guy, so I
Yeah.
assume it should be
Yes.
rejected. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, but yeah,
So then,
Pop Gun was the very first Image thing I ever did.
oh, dude, right on.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool. I'm glad to have you. So then what? So close that gap for us. So you're at this convention in 2002, and you're like, were you just submitting stuff, and then you get into know other creators, or like what led to the Popgun submission?
Oh wow. Oof. I was so basically after that first show, I came up with a strategy because again I had this background from my grandmother of like making plans and kind of like knocking things out little by little. So I
Yeah,
said, okay, cool. Well, I'm in college. I was in college for computer animation, uh, which ended up switching over to painting because I hated computer animation. But my intention was always comics. So I decided that okay, I have a full time curriculum, so I'm doing these hours per week, but I'll start making strategizing on how to like keep consistently making new comics. The plan was every 6 months I'll hit a comic convention and have a brand new portfolio, network. I made business cards,
Every
all that
six
stuff.
months, you had a brand new portfolio.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I
Jeez.
was making work constantly. I was
Yeah, yeah.
always working. And I mean, I the newspaper, university newspaper stuff was the experiment. It was the place they were paying me to experiment and do whatever I wanted. So I was learning all kind of stuff from that gig. But on top of that, I was also online, very online. So I was in tons of message boards. I was posting every week. Like I post at least two comics a week, every week in like 5 or 6 different message boards. So I was meeting people like crazy. And one of the guys, that I met, so it was all just kind of like, hey, you met this guy. He
Right,
would introduce you to this guy. Eventually, I got in contact with Mark Sable,
right.
um, and Mark was doing the Pop Gun thing. He's like, hey, I got the
Yeah.
script. I think it was 10 pages or something. Are you
Yep.
interested? I'm like, oh yeah. Like I've been trying to
Yeah.
get over an Image forever. So yeah, I'm in. So that's how I got in.
I don't think I've ever said this publicly. My dream for Pop Gun, and there was multiple editors, it wasn't just me, but my
Mhm.
dream was I wanted to be a snapshot of that period of time. This was
Mhm.
2008, I think, and I wanted to
Something
be
like
a
that.
snapshot of this period. It was like 400 pages, and I was like,
Hmm.
just cram as much in there as possible, and then see what emerges from that. And we had like
Hmm.
really early comics from guys like Hickman was in there later on.
Wow. Wow.
Wasn't his first Image thing, but it was pretty early
Hmm.
on. Remender was in there. A bunch of guys. Brandon Graham was there. There's his first Image stuff. Joko's first
Hmm.
Image stuff.
Hmm.
So it's cool to see this, like, I don't know, like
Hmm.
you reflect back on your life. It's kind of like having your, of course, much better quality wise, but like your childhood comics in print. Because I think it's so
Yes.
easy to learn, like, lose sight of the journey. Because I think a lot of people
Yeah.
will look at Chew as this massive overnight success, and it's like, no, I had to work really hard for a really long time.
Hmm.
I started
Yeah.
I started cleaning. I missed watching the X-Men show so I could, watch, so I could clean rooms, so I could buy comics, so I could get
Yeah.
this inspiration and this
Hmm.
drive to draw, and then I drew all the time. And like,
Hmm.
dude, I used to do portfolio reviews, much to I love meeting people at conventions. I love seeing their work, but I'm not good at
Hmm.
portfolio reviews.
Hmm.
But I would see these guys come in with like the same thing. Like I was like, I saw
Hmm.
you 2 years ago and you have the same art you're showing us. So to see like just this intense work ethic, not even
Hmm.
like just awesome work ethic is a better way to put it. It's
Hmm.
just it it makes sense why Chew was a quote overnight success that
Hmm.
took this long period of time of getting to. So when you
Hmm.
meet Layman, it had to be shortly after that because Popkin was 2008, so Chew was
Hmm.
2009, 2010. Is that right?
2009. So we met.
2009,
Uh, Here's what's funny. Here's what's funny about the Chew connection. So, like I said, I had this moment in the early 2000s, 2001 ish, where I discovered indie comics,
okay.
and Jim Food was my guy because it started with Kevin Smith, and then that led me to Clerks, which led me to
Right.
Jim Food, and then Jim Food's message board led me to Dave Crosland because
Oh, nice. Great guy.
Dave was doing a book with John Layman called Puffed at Image,
Right. Right.
and I was blown away. It's like, man, this art is amazing. Like I've never seen
Yeah.
anything like this. And I picked it up and I loved it. And I ended up following Layman around because I liked how he wrote. I was like,
Yeah.
man, he's funny. He's funny, but he's got some good stuff here. And then him and Dave did a book called They did Scarface at IDW,
Right.
the Scarface comic, and that was great too. Surprisingly great. It was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I just kind of I think Layman's early work was very influential on me in my storytelling sensibilities as a comic artist. Because again, I was unlearning everything I knew before. I was unlearning all the
Right.
Marvel DC stuff. I was rebuilding a style. And Layman's work on Puffed was very instrumental in building that new foundation. So I already knew the guy and I was a fan of his. And for years until I met him in '08, people had been telling me, you should meet John. I think you and Layman would probably you probably hit it off. Like, oh yeah, whatever. And I actually did meet him, I think in '06 or '07 at San Diego Comic Con. And he doesn't remember this, but he was completely not interested. He wasn't in comics at the moment. Like he wasn't in comics at the moment. He was in video games or something. And in
Mm.
typical layman fashion, he was just not interested. So cut to 2008. My wife and I had been married about a year. I was working a night job. She was working a day job. We were missing each other, and we were done with it. You know, I was tired of not seeing her anymore, and she was tired of not seeing me. And on top of that, I was starting to get I was getting offered gigs in comics, except I had this night job. So I
Mm.
was starting to turn away the gigs because I had this night job. And at some point, we just decided this is stupid. This is counterintuitive. You know, comics is what you want to do. I think it's time to go all in and just take this leap of faith. So we did, and ironically enough, it was Independence Day 2008 when
Uh,
I decided we decided. Like we had actually we were on a beach trip with her family, and we are on a ferry. We just got there that day. It's Independence Day, and we're on this ferry crossing. We're in Florida. We're crossing the bay, and the fireworks are going off overhead. We just got into the beach. We're going to be there for a week, and already we're like sad. And I remember looking at her, and she just like, I'm sad because you know when this trip is over, you're just going to go back to your job. I'm going to go back to mine. We're going to be two ships passing in the night. And then we just decided this is stupid. Like, let's just do it. Let's just do this. So we took the leap. When I got back from the vacation, I put in my notice at work for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks from there happened to be San Diego Comic Con, and I had been going for a few years at that point, and I just decided I'm going to Comic Con and I'm going to make it happen, like whatever it is, I'm going to make it happen in Comic Con that year, and I was preparing my portfolio and all this stuff the day before Comic Con. I was going to fly out on a Tuesday, so this is the Monday, and I had this panic, right? Like this anxiety, like hit me, like what am I doing? Like, can I actually do this? So I left my office. I went home, took a shower, and as I got out of the shower, I checked my email, and I hit the email, and this email pops up that says, "Hi, Rob, from John Layman." I'm like, what? Like I hit it. He's like, "Hey, Rob, you know, I'm a friend of a friend, and I got this thing that I think you would be really great for. You know, it's an ongoing. Well, it was only going to be 5 issues initially. He's like, you know, it's doesn't pay very much, but you know, it theoretically could have some back end, whatever. And are you interested?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, dude!" He's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, pretty sure Image will probably publish this." So
nice.
I'm like, dude, I'm actually flying to Comic Con like tomorrow. I'm gonna be there. And he's like, sweet, I'm gonna be there too. Here's the first issue, the first script of Chew, and along with the pitch. You know, tell me what you think. So I print it up, and we're on the plane. My wife flies with me, so she actually read it before I did, and we're flying. And I'd already determined at that point I'm going to make this work. I had decided to take the leap. This has landed in my lap with the dude that I like have been kind of into for quite a years at this point. I'm gonna make this work. I don't care what it is. And my wife reads it, and she just looks at me. My wife does not like comics. She does not. I mean,
Mine
she
either.
likes my comics. She
Right,
likes my comics. She does not like
right.
comics.
Right.
She reads Chew #1, and she says, "This is so you. Like this is you. Like this is so perfect for you." I said, "Cool." So I read it, met with John that night at the Hyatt Hotel, at the
Oh
Hyatt
yeah.
bar.
Mm.
He was a little drunk at the time.
Yep.
He told me everything there was to know about you on the first date, essentially, and that's how we met, man. And it just kind of went from there.
Dude, that rocks. That's so cool because yeah, I've never heard of any of that. I didn't know that, it's funny. It's like sort of like divine providence bringing you to Ma. I mean, long way bringing you to Ma food and bringing you to the Croslands and bringing you to Layman
Yeah.
and but
Mm-hmm.
just that consistency of like showing up and doing the hard work and you're doing this
Mm-hmm.
work and I'm sure I mean I won't speak for you, but I'm sure there were nights where you're like, why am I doing this? And you
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
as a friend of mine once put it, it's like you look back or you look forward and everything seems like chaos, but you look back and it's all plot.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's really cool to
Yep.
see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so walk us through a little bit working on Chew because it's a big. I mean, it's a big transition point for a couple of reasons. One is, it's an Image Comics book. That's a huge deal to have that be your first major project. You love
Mhm.
Image, right? You were
Mhm.
you were an Image kid. We talk about that a lot. But
Mhm.
also you had been doing comics for you, and it's this precious thing that's yours, and now
Mhm.
it's going to go out into the world. So talking about that, like sort of,
Mhm.
okay, now this is go time on one of the biggest platforms possible. Like, what's that like?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I recognized the opportunity right off the bat, and I had determined that I was going to make it work. Like I was going to kill it. And the thing that no one really knows, I don't even think John knew it at the time. I had never drawn a full comic before issue number one. Everything I had done was like 8-page shorts here, 10 pages here, like popgun. Everything was
Yeah,
short because no. Here's the thing: no one would give me the shot to do it, right? Because like I have like the quirky, cartoony style. So I would get offered stuff. Like I was in the running right before I got offered Shoe. I was actually in the running to draw some Pixar stuff because there was some studio that was doing Pixar comics. So
okay,
they had offered me, I forget, maybe Toy Story or something, right?
okay,
Like
sure.
something kiddie because I was a cartoony guy. Everyone would just give me that stuff because they couldn't see anything there. And I just kept saying, like, if you just give me a freaking shot, like, there has so much more here. You just don't see it. And John, whenever John hired me, well, I was on a trial basis initially. I wasn't initially hired completely. Layman to his, I completely understand why he did this, but he said, look, I don't know who you are. I like your work. Image has basically said they will publish this with the right artist. But just so you know, like, if Eric Stevenson passes on your art, I'm going to find another artist. Just so you know. And I was like, fair enough. I got it.
Yeah,
So he basically commissioned me for like 5 pages. And initially, I almost got fired right out of the gate. I don't think a lot of people know this either.
I've
So I
never heard this.
did,
Yeah,
I did a test page, right? The first test page I did was the Meet Tony Chu page, which is page 2 of issue 1.
hmm.
And at that point, every job I had gotten, the editor or whoever I was working for wanted me to draw like someone else, right? Because I have range and I can kind of like I can mix and match stuff. And they're like, well, maybe you could draw more like a Scotty Young here, or more like this here, or that whatever here. And Layman had told me that he had been pitching it at Vertigo initially, and Vertigo was passing on it. Vertigo actually had flat out told Layman, "Do not publish this. This will be the end of your career. Don't ever publish it. Don't ever publish Chew." So, in Layman being very, very that was just a challenge. Like the second
Yeah,
they
dude, I
said that
love
to
it.
him, it was going to happen. So Chew was basically his gigantic middle finger to the industry. He was gonna make it, burn the house down, and leave.
Yeah,
That was the plan. So I thought, okay, cool. Well, he's pitching it at Vertigo. He probably wants a Vertigo style, whatever. So I did this other sort of like Vertigo esque Chew style for the first page, and it was atrocious. And he hated it. He hated it. He's just like, this is not what I'm looking for. I was like, all right, well, look, what are you looking for? And he's like, what's on your website? That's what I'm looking for. And my website was just a bunch of me screwing around. I had this quirky thing I just did for myself that I like. He's like, do that. And I was like, well, I have no problem doing that. It's just that no one in the past, no one wanted to pay me to do that. But if that, I don't know if that's going to sell any comics, but if that's what you want, I will do that. So I came back with the page with the first Meet Tony Chu page. That's in the book. And he's like, it's perfect. Keep going. So I kept going. And as I kept going, as I said, he only commissioned me for like 4 or 5 pages for a pitch. And the more I did it, the more he fell in love with it. And he would freak out when I sent him pages. He was like, "Oh my god!" Like, "Oh my god!" Like we would be texting on like Google Chat or something, and he was just like, "This is so perfect. Like, you're the guy. You're the guy." And eventually, he basically told me that he doesn't remember any of this either. I remember it because
right
it was very like it was building me up. The more he was telling me these
on.
things,
Yeah,
and he just told me like, "Look, I've decided that if Image passes on this, we're going somewhere else. Like, you are the guy." Like, so we're
Right.
making this happen. So that's how it happened. Like I kept chugging along. And what's funny is that at some point I had to figure out how to double my production because I'd never done a monthly comic before, and I was basically in the very beginning of Chew. I was penciling, inking, coloring, doing everything, all the visual stuff, all of the book design stuff. I did all that stuff. So initially, I was only doing about 3 pages a week, and which translated to about 12 pages a month. So by the time issue one came out in June 2009, I was
Yeah.
only up to like issue three. So I wasn't that far ahead, right? So at some point I realized like, holy crap, I have to figure out how to do 20 pages a month. I've only been doing 12. How am I going to do this? So like I had to figure out really, really quick, and I did, how to just make this work because I decided this has to work. Even before it hit, there was no way I was gonna not do my best and kill this thing. At the very least, it was gonna be the best portfolio piece I could have, and hopefully get work from it. So, but it worked out, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I'd say so. So you've been filling a lot of gaps for me. Let me fill in a gap for you. So I was at Image at the time. I was on staff at Image
Mm-hmm.
Comics. And if it was 2008, I don't remember as marketing guy yet, but one of my jobs early on, and kind of remained my job till I was not at the company anymore, was I would get we'd get a spreadsheet from Diamond every month, right? And it was like, here are your numbers for whatever. Da,
Mm-hmm.
da, da. Part of my job was to order the numbers in for partners and like order them from like best selling to least selling, da da da. And then also mail them to creators, email them to creators.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be frank with you, dude. Like, in after post 2008, like it was not a fun job. It was
Yeah.
like, and this is pre Saga by several years, and it was,
Oh yeah.
like there were hits. I mean, Kirkman. I love sending Kirkman numbers, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
because it was Walking Dead kept going up and up and up and up and up, and that was really cool to see. But especially on books that I felt invested in. But then,
Mm-hmm.
shoot, number one numbers come out. They were very
Oh.
good, and I just remember being like, "Oh, thank God, here we go. This is a
Well, I
good,
mean, that,
good month."
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that was, you got to back it up a couple months because we
Yeah,
ended up, the initial orders were not good. The
not good.
initial
That's
orders,
true. Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
oh, no, I remember when the initial order for
you're
issue
right.
number one came out. I remember the email, I was on the email with Eric,
Right.
with Stevenson.
Yeah,
And all I remember Eric saying is, that's disappointing.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
he
I
said.
remember that.
It was
Yep,
like, that's not good. Like,
yep.
issue one is supposed to be the one that's high, and then
Right,
you go down because everyone
right,
wants an issue number one.
right.
Nobody wanted an issue number one. Like no one thought
Mhm.
it was going to be good, and then
Right.
it came out, and then I just remember the day it came out. It came out the day after my birthday. It came out on June 3rd, 2009, and I just remember there being this warm kind of like buzz going on, and I was getting emails from people at different shops. They're like, "Man, like your book is really good, and we're
Yep,
sold out." And
yep.
we weren't really impressed at the sellout because it's like, well, there's only like
Yeah,
5,000
there's
copies.
only 5,000 up there.
Right. I'm like, yeah, like, of course it's sold out. No one wanted
Right.
it. But then I think the first review came in the day it came out. Like, I remember waking up and seeing this review, and it was from IGN. Back when, I don't know if IGN still does reviews, but it did back then. And it was
Mm.
just, we got like a 9.9 out of 10 or something, some crazy
Yeah.
score. And it said, I will never forget the tagline. The tagline was, Image releases its most brilliant release in years. And I
Mm.
was like, really? I was like, well, that's nice. And then it
Mm.
just opened up from there. Like everything just blew up within the span of days. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wild period of time because it was
Mm-hmm.
the numbers were the ones that were like, it was fine, nice having a book where the numbers were going up and up and up and up and up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, that was a good period of time. Um,
Yeah.
so are you okay to go a little long? Like, we're coming towards
Yeah.
time and we got to chew. So I'm kind of, if it works for you, I want to go a little
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah. Let's
Because
do
I
it.
because I don't want to skip over too much. Um, actually, a well-timed question just came in um,
Mm.
from on the chat, which is Rob you said something about having to figure out how to get to 20 pages a month from 12.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
can you curious, like, what did you actually do to up that production? Because it's an easy thing to
Yeah.
say, but it's really hard to do.
Yeah. Well, before Chew came out, I had a bunch of side gigs because Chew didn't pay well, and I just needed more money. So like I had some design gigs. I was doing like a couple of like kids books for local people, that sort of thing. So
Uh-huh.
part of that was letting all that stuff go. Like I let all that stuff go. On top of that, I hired a color assistant who was basically like doing a lot of flats and that sort of thing for my guides. So like I had a bunch of little things that I did that just kind of like helped out. I learned how to just streamline and just figure out, okay, like where where is my time best served and where am I most valuable? I'm most valuable behind the drawing desk. Like I need to
Right.
be here chopping through this stuff. I don't need to be like, doing the flats and like basically coloring my number. I don't need to be doing that. So I basically just dropped all this stuff off the side and just focused on where I was most valuable. And it helped. It helped a lot. So eventually we ended up not quite at a monthly thing. Like we were ended up doing, I think I could finish an issue in about 5.5 weeks.
Uh-huh.
But what changed, what also shifted. So um, again, this is all pre-saga. And basically I wanted to take a break between arcs. And I told Eric this from the beginning. I'm like, look, I can do 5 issues, monthly, but after that, I need a break. I need a breather. I need to like recharge to do the next arc because about the plan at some point after we saw the numbers and people showed up, we realized I think we'll actually be able to go 60 issues, because 60 was we wanted to do what Why the Last Man did or what
Right.
Transmetropolitan did, our Preacher. Like 60 was the number we were always going for. You
Uh-huh.
know, if we didn't actually think we'd get there, honestly. We
Yeah.
thought 5 issues would be it, but it showed up. So we went to 60. So I told Eric, I can't do this for 60 issues without a break. They kind of balked at it.
Yeah.
Kurtman had some good feedback. Kurtman actually, I've never said this before. The first Comic Con we did for Chew, which was unbelievable. That's a whole other story we should dig into later. But I'm at the first Comic Con for Chew. It's been an amazing show. At that point, two comics are out, two issues of Chew are out, and I'm just on cloud nine. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm leaving Comic Con with money in my pocket, which had never happened before.
Yeah.
And I'm leaving. I'm walking down the center aisle of Comic Con, and I end up coming up upon Robert Kirkman,
All right.
and Kirkman had been one of our biggest champions. And it there's more there. I don't want to get into. I decided not to get into. I'm calling it
Are you
an
sure?
audible not to get into. But
All right. We're gonna continue
I
this
got
call after
yes,
this because I want to hear it.
yes. Uh, but I walked into Kurtman because Kurtman had been our most vocal advocate.
Yeah.
Kurtman was a guy that said this book, people need to be reading this book.
Yeah.
And he was calling it the next Walking Dead. He was calling it that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. I liked Kurtman. So I walk up to him and he was in the middle of talking to a guy and he sees me. He like tells the guy, hey, excuse me for a minute. And he comes alongside me and he puts his arm around me and he starts saying, hey, look, you know how I know you're talking about taking a break between issue 5 and 6. I know you're like gonna be tired. I understand that. And he starts explaining to me all the reasons why I should not take that break. He's like, look, and he starts talking about just the financial aspect of it. And he's just like,
Yeah.
look, when you're like dead tired at the end of this, what I want you to do is I want you to think about the fact that the reason Ryan Otley works for me and not in Marvel is because Marvel can't pay him what I pay him. And he just starts saying like, trust me, like stay with, like just go through it because
Yeah.
his philosophy was you have to be regular. Like you, at least
Yeah.
for the first year, you have to be monthly. And then after
Right.
that, if you want to take a break, that's fine. So he talked me into it, and he ended up doing the whole Godfather thing. Like I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, thanks for the feedback. He's like, oh, just so I may call upon you down the road to do a favor or something like that. Like like it's a great moment. And he was right. So for the first year, I did 10 monthly issues. I just
Uh-huh.
plowed through the first two arcs, and it did
Wow.
really well. But I was
Yeah.
dead tired by the end of that. I was burnt out.
Yeah. Didn't he also run a Chew
Hmm.
preview or like even the first issue? I don't know. This is my vague memory.
Yeah.
What was
Um.
that?
Well, shit. I'll tell the story. I'll tell the story. I'll
Ah,
tell
here
it
we
here.
go.
I've never told it publicly. I hope it doesn't get me in trouble.
Uh,
Uh. So basically, as I said, Layman told me, "Hey, look, um, if Eric Stevens doesn't approve you, we're gonna go somewhere else." I
yeah,
said, I'm flattered by that, whatever.
yeah,
And Layman sent in the pitch, and Eric's a good dude. The problem is that Eric's not always the best at email. So time starts going by, and I'm still making pages, but we haven't been approved that image yet. So eventually, I told Layman. Layman doesn't know what to do, and I said, "Well, why don't you just email Kirkman? Like
uh,
email Kirkman because Kirkman had just become a partner, and I knew Kirkman from years
right,
before. So I
right,
said, like, just email Kirkman. Like, if Eric is not replying to you, go to someone who has
right,
power."
right,
So he went to Kirkman, and Kirkman looked at it. He saw Chew the pitch, and he said, "This is phenomenal. We're definitely doing this." And
yeah,
so he kind of like approved it. And then we ended up getting an email later from Eric, who was a little
yeah,
he was unhappy we went around him. But it's like
yeah,
what else could we do, you know? So that's
yeah,
basically how Chew got approved. And that's
yeah,
also how Kurtman learned about Chew. Like
yeah,
he saw it and fell in love with it and decided that this is a great book. Like there's something special here. So before the book came out, he ran like a 5-page preview
that's
in
right.
The Walking Dead, and
Mhm.
but it was just black. It was a black and white thing. Um,
Right.
and then after that, when it finally did come out and it blew up, Cartman circles back around and he's like, "Hey, let's print the entire first issue of
First,
Chew on the other side of The Walking Dead," which we did, which was it's just crazy. I mean, I think back to it, I'm like, this is crazy, man. So Kurtman ended up being like a huge supporter of us,
yeah,
and all like I thanked him at the following Comic Cons. Like, look, thank you for coming along, but for like believing in what we were doing. And
yeah,
he was so non arrogant about it, and he said,
mhm.
all I did, all I did was I just gave you a spotlight. Like you guys did it. Like I
Yep.
didn't do this
It's true
thing.
though.
Like he was even Eric was that way as well. Like the first time I
Yeah,
met
yep.
Eric was on Comic Con the last day in 2008 2009, and I was
Yeah,
like, dude, thank you for giving us a shot.
yeah,
And he was like, we didn't do anything. Like
yeah,
Image
yeah,
really is just Image is just a platform, but like the
right.
work is you. So they
Yeah,
really don't look at it as like they don't Image really doesn't look at it like we made it happen. They look at it
right.
as you guys put in the work, you guys showed up, you guys kept pumping it out. We just published
Yeah,
it. So
right.
they're good people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kirkman, especially, man, like I've seen him and like guys like Jim Valentino's another one who I always like to mention. Like those guys have done so much for comics that no one will ever know
Yeah.
along those periods. And like that Chew stuff is pretty public facing. But I think it's because I mean, especially like, with Robert, he only predated you by a short period of time. We're talking like
Mm-hmm.
a few years, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because even Stevenson, he was doing comics. I mean, he was involved in Brigade back in the day,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
he was there. And so, I think Kirkman could see what you guys were doing, that you're hustling hard, and that was, that hard work is, not even so
Mm-hmm.
much directly by them, but just sort of the process or divinely, like that is rewarded.
Yes. Yes.
Um, okay,
Yeah,
so
And Kirkman. I mean, just to say one more thing about Kirkman,
yes, go.
Kirkman has been. I first met him at a small show
Yeah.
in Austin, like 2005 or 2006 or something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like the Walking Dead, he was the Walking Dead guy, but he was not the Walking Dead guy,
You did good.
obviously.
Yeah.
But we ended up kind of bumping into each other because we were all staying in the same hotel. So he ended up riding back with us from the convention to the hotel. And at the end of the night, at the end of the show, the organizer took us all out for dinner. So we all ended up sitting down for tacos. And Kurtman ended up sitting across from me at the table. And we all had a really, really great conversation just about the business. And from that moment on, there's been numerous times in my career where I needed some kind of wisdom. And I've always been the kind of guy to just reach out to people. Like even way
Yeah.
before I was in comics, I would just email professionals and ask the question. And more times than not, people got back to me. So Kurtman was the guy that, and he has been the guy my entire career, where I
Mm,
can count on at least, you know, at least a couple hands where I've emailed him and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And this
yeah.
guy freaking always replies. And he always
Yeah.
replies with just the right thing. Like he
Yeah.
says, and it's
Yeah.
not a lot of times he doesn't answer the question. He just gives
Right.
his wisdom on it. But I actually did this last year. Or no, I take this back. 2 years ago when we optioned Farmhand at AMC and I started working at AMC, I was looking for wisdom about AMC. Kurtman had been working at AMC for Walking Dead.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
I said, cool, hey, I'll see if I can reach out to him. I don't know if he'll still answer my emails. He's the Walking Dead guy now, you know, and I hadn't seen him in years. So I emailed him cold and said, "Hey, I got this thing going on at AMC. Curious if we could talk." And so I emailed him, and then later that day, my phone rings, and I look at my phone. It just says Robert Kirkman. I was like, "How did he get my phone number? Like, I don't even know how he got my phone number." And I was just blown away by that. It's like this guy is still the same guy he was before he became Robert Kirkman of The Walking Dead on AMC.
Yeah.
Like the guy hasn't changed at all. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of that guy. Like he's a
Yeah.
good guy.
Yeah. Kirkman. Let's talk about this actually. So Kirkman's. I have a very similar experience with him, and I think it speaks to a larger lesson that was good for me to learn in my career and some of the to model myself around. But I met Robert. Well, it depends what you count. So I met Robert way early on. I don't think he even remembers any of this, but we were all big
Mhm.
fans of this comic book called Savage Dragon. And there was an online
Uh,
Savage Dragon fan club, and then there was a message board. And that was back in the day when Robert would post on there and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this wrestling comic, but it's called Between the Ropes. Check it out." And then the book never even came out. But he would keep posting, 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 posting. It'd be like, "Oh, now I got Tech Jack coming out. Everyone check it out. Now it's Cloudfall." And so my
I
buddy
love
Mark
your
Engler,
I love your Kirkman impression. It's fantastic.
I can't not do it. And I will say my claim to fame is there's a great guy named Jonathan Chan who was like the production and head at Image. And one day Kirkman had come in to like his first ever, I don't think he was a partner, I think he was just in town or whatever for a meeting.
Mm.
And Jonathan thought I was doing my Kirkman impression in Stevenson's office, but it was actually was Robert Kirkman. So that's my claim to fame. Um, Jonathan's a very smart man. So the fact that he thought
Yeah,
that was,
yeah,
but anyway, point is, so
yeah.
I know Robert early on, and we'd talk, and he would email. Like I would ask questions, like you're a person who really makes comics, and I'm interested in making
Mm,
comics, and I'm this broke kid living in like the suburbs outside of Portland in this town called
mm,
Gresham. Like, and he would answer my questions, blah 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 blah. And he offered me a
mm.
box of Funkatron books, which he never sent. But anyway, point is, years later, he's my friend Mark is working for him at San Diego Comic Con on a book called Capes. My friend Mark Engler
Mm,
has gone on and
mm,
has great prints and colorists and everything. And you know, I remember I was a couple years ago. I had volunteered to run Larson's booth through the Savage Dragon fan club, and Kirkman was like, "Man, I don't want to be running this booth." And it was like back then the booth was like a table. This was
mm.
2004 at San Diego Comic Con. And it was like Image used to have like a shanty town sort of like different
Yeah.
creators, and there would be like one
Oh
Image
yeah.
booth. It was I actually thought it was awesome. I gotta say,
Yeah.
I missed them. So anyway, a bazaar maybe is a better term than shanty town. But anyway, point is there was a
Hmm.
collection of different creators all in the central area. And
Mm,
Mark was like, "Well, Joe volunteered to run Larson's booth a couple times. Like, you just have him do it." So I did it.
mm,
And I could be wrong because it's been 20 years now, but I believe we made like $3,000 through the course of that
mm,
Comic Con. And Kirkman was like,
mm.
"This is the most amount of money I've ever seen. Like, like I will fly you out to any show and we'll go and blah 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 blah." And so anyway, um, anyway, he he didn't fly me out to every show, but what he did was Larson was becoming publisher, and they were going to move to San Francisco, and he knew I lived in San Francisco,
Mm,
or they're moving to Berkeley, and he knew I lived in San Francisco,
mm,
and he actually said you should hire Joe,
mm.
And so changed my life. And in fact, I remember that afternoon, Steve Larson came up to me, was like, "Hey man, how's life going?" And I kind of knew him for a little bit, so I was open with him. I was like, "My girlfriend and I just broke up. I work at Hollywood Video till like 1 in the morning, and then I color flat comics." Blah blah blah. He's like, "How do you like all that?" And I was like, "Dude, it sucks." He goes, "Why don't you come work for me? Change my life."
Wow. Wow.
Years later, and this is ultimately what I'm getting to. This is the more important thing than my personal interaction with Kirkman. Was years later, Kirkman and I were actually going to co-write a book together, and it just didn't work out. We just didn't see eye to eye on it. It wasn't nothing, no drama or anything. It
Yeah.
just didn't happen, right? There's a million
Hmm.
stuff like people have projects that don't work out.
Yeah.
So we had an agreement and whatever. I signed it and I got my money, blah blah blah. And then I was bummed out because I love Robert, I love his work, and I'd love to do
Hmm.
something with him.
Hmm.
Um, but then I see an email that I'm copied on. It's not to me.
Hmm.
Robert wrote an email to Tom Brevoort at Marvel Comics, a company that Robert very publicly did not work for anymore.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Hey man, I've always wondered like what's going on with Joe Keating there, and we'd love to have him, like you should have him do more stuff there." And got to me and Tom talking.
Wow.
He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And this is post Walking Dead TV show. This is
Hmm.
post. I mean, he was. I don't know how rich he was, but he was very very rich.
Yeah.
And like he didn't have to do that.
Right.
And there's a million different stories like that. I mean, I don't think you and I are uniquely the two guys on earth who happen to be on a Zoom call talking about the
Hmm.
generosity of the guy. And I think that's
Yeah.
a good lesson was like, I even asked him on one of the during one of the writers' rooms we had for that book. I was like, "You've never changed. You're like the same guy who made $3,000
Hmm.
and was stoked." And then, and
Hmm.
he's like, "I don't think money changes people. I think it just makes you more of
Wow.
what you have internally." So it's like the important, I guess, this
Mm.
kind of thing that I'm ultimately getting at is like having
Yeah.
that sort of those core values, and for you, you were a 6, 7, 8 year old, you know, cleaning dentist office to make money to
Hmm.
make comics, and now you've
Hmm.
applied these things to now
Hmm.
you've finished Chew.
Hmm.
You're writing and drawing Farmhand. I know you're writing
Hmm.
stuff. You wrote the Mosley at Boom.
Hmm.
You've got some other stuff carrying out. So it's just like I think we can easily lose sight of making sure to have those sort of core values
Hmm.
and ethics. So anyway, I don't know, man.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know we're talking a lot about Robert Kirkman here, but I think ultimately what we're talking about is it's really impressive to hear all that and how it relates to what you've done. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk another like 3 hours. And I did
Probably.
get Curtis to go a little long. I do kind of want to get a little bit, if you're cool with it, about like kind of what you're up to now,
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
extent you're able to talk about it, because I know some stuff you can't talk about. And then
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
also kind of like to get into, I kind of talked with Nick about this too. You know, you guys are part of Vast Vision in the sense that your own labels are part of our Discord and our community. So
Mm.
I'm curious, like, how does that, I don't know, what are you working on? What's your vision for participation in
Yeah.
Vast Vision?
Well, I mean, I think th there's certain things that I know that I think post shoe I knew that there was some expansion and some shifting that was going to be happening, that I wouldn't stay where I was in terms of being an artist on other people's work. My ambition was always to expand and to kind of make my own work, to write my own thing. I always looked at myself as a writer first. So post shoe, farmhand was a natural evolution. Writing and drawing my own thing, and not just doing that, but project managing the entire thing, which has been hard, easily the hardest thing I've ever done, the hardest project
Yeah.
I've ever done. Um, but I think from there, I think the next step is probably some form of self-publishing. I think I don't know. I think I've always sort of been built. I feel like that same kid that used to just make the little, you know, pink construction paper comics for myself
Yeah.
has always like he self-publishing seems like the perfect place for that kid. Um, and I mean, so I think self-publishing is next for me. So a lot of what I'm doing right now is sort of tying up loose ends, finishing farmhand, uh, finishing up some work for hire stuff here and there. But yeah, 2025, I think, is going to be the year that I kind of make the jump into something completely new, self-publishing. I think I've been feeling like I'm in a season of sort of reconnecting with my audience. I think I had this weird thing happen post Chew in the middle of Farmhand. You know, COVID happened, all that stuff happened, but also I got really burned out, flat out. I think I had been pushing. I mean, you know, the monthly comic grind over 60 plus issues, and just the
Yeah.
travel. I was at a convention almost every month. I wasn't taking care of myself. On top of that, we had three kids in the middle of all that craziness, you know. And I crashed at some point in 2020, and I think I needed to recalibrate and kind of reground. So it feels like now all the kind of smoke is clearing up. And it feels like I'm kind of coming out of my hole. I think in COVID and in the middle of that burnout, I kind of like pulled back from everything. I mean, even before COVID happened, I decided I think I'm done with Comic Cons for a while because I was just so tired, and I wanted to be more present at home. Like I said, I think the other side of being at every show is you're not home, and when you do come home, you're basically making up for lost time, and you're trying to make up on the work that you didn't do while you were gone. Uh, so I just decided to just take some time, reconnect at home, find a new. I don't believe in. I think I've come to a place of realizing work life balance doesn't exist, but finding a new work life balance, because my
Yeah.
old work life balance while I was on Chew, I think was very unhealthy. You know, I think it was so grind, crazy long days. Um, I think I had too much division between my home, my family, and my work. So I think now the new thing is bringing things together in a healthier way. So I feel physically and really just as a person all around way more mature and
Yeah.
grounded and balanced than I was back when I was doing Chew. Chew, I was just so myopic. Chew, I was just like, I just got to do this. I got to do
Yeah.
this thing, and I'm glad I did it. But I don't think that I can't do that now. You know,
Yeah.
I'm 15 years older than I was then. I have more responsibility. I have more people who look to me, and I am responsible for. Um, so now it feels like I'm in a new phase of reconnecting. You know, my YouTube channel is a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's me. I mean, that single act of doing the YouTube channel, something I said I would never do. I think
Yeah.
is the biggest act of opening things up and saying, "Hey, here I am." You know, because all of Chew, I've always wanted to be the guy that you didn't see my face, you just saw the work.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think I've realized for the first time that's not how this works. Not now. This isn't how this is
Yeah.
going to be. I think my value is bigger than what I make at the desk. You know, I think I have
Yeah.
other things from my experiences in the industry. I think I've learned a lot. I mean, when you're sitting behind a drawing desk for, you know, by yourself, minimum 8 hours per day, you have a lot of time to think, and you have a lot of time to just kind of work through some things. So I think I have a lot more to give, and the YouTube is part of it. And I think I've just had a lot of affirmation and confirmation for the past year that I need to, that I've always had sort of a division between me and my audience, you know,
Hmm.
whether it's a publisher, which I've worked for some great publishers, they've been good to me. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think I'm better when I'm directly connected to my people and to
Yeah.
connected to the people that I'm serving in a way. And I think my audience responds to that as well. So yeah, I think that's what's next for me in terms of the self-publishing and that sort of thing. And there's some other things. I have some other stuff planned. I have a book deal at Abrams that hasn't necessarily been announced yet, but that's for down the road. Uh, and I think in regards to Vast Vision, I think I'm sort of entering a phase in my life. I'm still a young guy. I'll be 42 this year, but I do think, like I said, I've always been old for my age,
Right.
and um, I think I'm entering a phase of legacy planning and sort of kind of starting to give back more than I have in the past. So I think Vast Vision is part of that. I think, and I don't exactly know what it looks like, to be honest. But I do think I think what is being crafted here and what's been crafted over the weekend, especially over this weekend, uh, I think we were all really frustrated with the culture we were seeing online and just the general what comic culture had become. We all came up in the early 2000s, social media. The
Right.
2010s were fantastic for Twitter. Like the
Yeah.
environment was great. It's like, oh, this
Yeah.
is like a comic renaissance.
Yeah.
Um, and then things got really not fun and
Yeah.
really ugly. It really just it did it, like I kept telling myself, I just got into this to draw comics. Like I just
Yeah.
came here to draw comics. I don't want all this other crap, all this infighting and the politics and all this stuff. I just love the medium. And
Yeah.
I want to tell and enjoy cool stories. So I think people are tired of the drama. I think we're tired of the
Yeah.
YouTube fighting. I think we're tired of the outrage stuff. At least I am. And I talk to a lot
Oh,
of
dude,
people. Yeah,
100%.
yeah, yeah. I
Enough.
talk to a lot of people. Yes, I talk to a lot of people from a lot of different political leanings and everything, and we're all having the same
Yeah.
conversation. This is stupid.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Let's stop yelling at each other and let's just enjoy the freaking craft. Because I think this is the best craft there is. You know.
Yeah.
So
100%.
so I think this was an important weekend, and I'm still figuring out what my role in it is going to be, but I do think I have a role in it.
Yeah.
So
I know
it's
you do. And I'm so happy to see you come out and talk on YouTube and share it. Like, you're it's not just, hey, watch me draw. That's an element of it, but it's also like, here's the honesty. Like, I agree with you. I 100% design not even just a positivity, but also just like, let's just be honest here, and like
yes.
you talk a lot about your YouTube channel about the artistic life and the artistic pursuit. And it's not just, hey, buy
Mhm.
my thing,
Yeah.
and I know it's really easy to be like, hey, here's a thing that makes you angry. You should buy my thing instead of the angry thing. I'll talk about this
Yes.
angry thing ad nauseum. And I
Mhm.
think people are burnt out on it. And it's too bad,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of books that those guys who put out, like, I'm the angry guy, they actually do cool comics. And I was
Yeah.
like, we've just talked about your comic. I would be 100% all about this. And,
Yes.
I've been shown grace. Well, you and I have been shown grace. I think we are called to show grace to other people. If any of those guys are
Mhm.
like, I'm ready to put this away and move on,
Mhm. Mhm.
doors open, dude. You know?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, man, I'm pumped. I'm excited for this next phase of Rob Guillory. Um, and just phase for comics. I know people want good stuff and
Yeah.
they want cool comics and they want to be part of it. And what
Mhm.
you do on YouTube and what Nick does and what we're doing through Vast
Mhm.
Vision, like that's it, man. Enough
Yeah.
horsing around, folks. Let's get to work and make cool stuff and get to
Yes.
3D.
Yeah.
Rob, beyond Vast Vision, where can people find you on the internet?
RobGuillory.com is my official online home. But I'm also on Instagram, Rob_Guillory,
Mhm.
Facebook at Rob Guillory Art, and yeah, the YouTube channel is also at Rob Guillory Art, and that's pretty much it for me because too much social media is just I can't handle
Yeah,
it.
well
So
said.
I try to keep it to a minimum and try to make the most impact wherever I am.
Well said. All right, dude. Again, I feel like we do this for 3 more hours. I'm sure we could keep going on. We should just get on here again, get talking,
Absolutely.
swap more Kirkman stories. All right, Curtis, floor is yours again. Thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been a fun weekend. We'll be doing more of this. Cool stuff is coming up.